Mr. Speaker, I'm down the list, so I'd like to claim the time of Mr. Wolf of Virginia.
Without objection, Mr. Burton of Indiana is recognized for 5 minutes.
I'd like to say to my colleagues who may be in their offices that we're going to join me in a special order tonight, that we're not going to be able to do it because of the late hour. So I'm going to take a 5-minute special order to talk about some of the issues we were going to discuss. Today we discussed at length the war in Iraq, and that's probably the most important issue facing America today, and I'm glad we had that very thorough debate. But one of the things that's very, very important that we're not focusing enough attention on is transparency in government and the amount of money that we're spending and the taxes that are going to be raised. When this new Speaker and the majority came into power, they said this was going to be the most transparent House in the history of the country in all respects. And just 2 weeks ago, the majority wanted to start talking about a slush fund rather than debating each one of the earmarks that should have been debated on this floor. And they were going to take that slush fund money and go to the conference committee and behind closed doors decide how that money was going to be spent. The American people don't want that. The American people want to hear these issues debated, the amount of money being debated for special projects so that they know where their tax dollars are going and what the purpose is. Not all earmarks are bad. Some of them are very, very good and very necessary, but they ought to be debated one by one on this floor so the American people know where their money is going. I'd like to also say that the budget that was passed by the opposition is going to necessitate at least a $217 billion tax increase, and in all probability it'll be more like $392 billion, which would be the largest tax increase in the history of this country. And that at a time when we need to address some of the more pressing issues like how we deal with the Social Security Trust Fund. The Social Security Trust Fund will go into deficit in 10 years. In 10 years. And at that point, we're going to see the American people starting to look at Social Security as a program that's going to be in the past, no longer something that we can rely on in the future. The young people in this country are going to have a terrible time planning for their retirement because there won't be any money in the Social Security Trust Fund in the future for these young people unless we start addressing the problem right now, and we're not doing it. As I said, the projected tax collections for Social Security and the spending for Social Security are going to be exceeded in 10 years. And after that, adjusting for inflation, the annual deficits for Social Security will reach $68 billion in the year 2020, $267 billion in 2030, and $331 billion in 2035. Many of us won't be around to see that, but our kids and our grandkids will, and they'll be saying, why didn't we address the issue of the deficits in Social Security when we had a chance? We can do that still today, but we're not focusing attention on that. And the people who are relying on Social Security and the Social Security Trust Fund ought to know that we're not addressing the problem, and the solvency of that fund, not for us, but for the future generations, is not going to be there, which means that we'll have to either raise taxes or cut benefits. This is going to happen unless we address that issue. So I'd just like to say to my colleagues tonight, we are concentrating on the major issues, the war in Iraq, and a lot of other issues that are very important. But we must not neglect the budget. We must not neglect transparency and bringing these issues to the floor for debate. And we must not neglect addressing the issue of Social Security reform, because if we don't do it, our kids and our grandkids aren't going to have a retirement program to rely on. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.